Okay, so this is Standard 8, Instructional Strategies. And our theme this month is space and planets, and the lesson we did was about astronauts and kind of the space station, and all culminated in what kind of foods would they eat on the space station.
Right.
So the first element was, did the candidate ask questions effectively to engage students in the lesson? So we've kind of been talking about gravity and space and things a lot, and this was one of the first lessons where we really talked about being astronauts, and I tried to ask them questions about like what would be different about life on the space station. You know, how would no gravity affect you? So I tried to ask them a lot of questions to let them think about what would be different before just telling them.
Yeah, okay, so I think at the beginning of that lesson, when you introduced the topic, before you told them what are the differences, you told them what they think space would be like, and of course you led them through those questions as well by, really defining on the whole that there is no gravity, and while it's warm on certain parts of the moon, while it's warm where the sun is facing you, it's extremely cold as well. And then you let them work out answers from there about the ways to live up in space, in the space station. And this is all before you even introduced... This was before you introduced the suit, right?
That was kind of like the review of, why would you need a spacesuit if you're outside in space?
Yeah.
So even that, trying to ask them questions, like why... What does space have?
Yeah, I remember.
And what doesn't it have?
And the big one you were trying to get them, you wanted them to answer was that there's no air.
Right.
And that was like, you let them go towards that. I think there was a few answers before that. No light or something. They were answering like, they were obviously thinking over the question and trying, and then by the end they actually came up with their own the answer, which was what you wanted was air, and that segued you into the next part. Well, how do they live if there's no air?
Yeah, and even with that little review thing, if one of the elements was wrong, like you didn't have a helmet or they didn't have boots, why wouldn't that be good? So even like when they were making silly mistakes, trying to ask them like, okay, it's funny, but why would that be a bad idea in space?
Right. I think this also goes into the fact when we were talking about the diapers for the astronauts as well. Like, well, how do you think they go? And then they had to come up with their own answers. I don't know if they came up with the diaper. I think they might have, did they?
I think so.
And so they were they laughed about it, but also it was one of those kind of, it's a good way for them to process that information.
You're gonna look at me and keep okay. Yeah, and so then we moved into kind of the bulk of it, which would be life on the space station, how it would be different, and trying to ask questions about, we did how do you wash your hair, how do you brush your teeth, how do you wash your hands,
right?
Letting them kind of think first, like how do you think it would be different,
right?
And then watching a video. So first asking them a question, letting them put out their answers, showing them a video of the, how it actually works,
right?
And then moving on to the next video, and with what they learned from hand washing, applying it to hair washing, and they got better. The next time they kind of had exposure to the idea, saw the reality, and could apply what they learned to something similar.
Right.
Which seemed to work pretty well.
Yeah. So I'd say outstanding all that. I mean, you hit all the marks there. You were like getting them to really think about what they were trying to what was the answer you were looking for, but also what they thought might be the answer. So they were obviously thinking about that, and also explaining the reasons and thinking of why. Of why they would need that. So I think, there was a lot of, how would I say it? Like, it says they're probing for student understanding. There's another word for that. Like, getting them to really come up with the answers on their own. I think you did good with that.
Yeah, and their understanding through questions and letting them make up their own minds. Yeah. From the beginning of the lesson to the end of the lesson, kind of seeing that they had, a better understanding of what we were talking about.
Right.
By the end than they did in the beginning, but all through them thinking, not telling them what to think.
Yeah, and I don't think at any point you actually told them. They figured it all out on their own. Through direction.
Great. The next one was helping students learn to access, interpret, evaluate, and apply information. So I tried to hit all of those. We've been talking a lot about space, but accessing the idea is kind of hard.
Right.
So that was where videos came in.
Right.
We use props like the flashcards and the globe, but I think the videos really give the kids a sense of what life is like. So that helps them access the information.
Right.
And it also, I think, asking them the open-ended questions helps them interpret and evaluate some of the things we were talking about. What would life be like on the space station?
Right.
How would it be different? What is water like? Why is it difficult to get food and water to the space station? So really thinking deeply and evaluating. And we did our what would you bring to the space station?
Right.
And we had a limited amount of space, and everyone got to choose something. And afterwards, evaluating, was this a good idea? Was it a good idea to bring hairbrushes when we didn't have water?
Right.
So kind of evaluating what is and isn't important, and then in the end, applying some of the information we learned about food in space to making our own menus in space. So I tried to hit all 4 of those.
Yeah, there was quite a bit there. Again, I'd say outstanding. There was a lot of before you had some of the videos that you presented them, like for example the how we get the food up to space. You had them figure out how as well. They had to think of ways of their own, and you could find out what their thought processes was in that. You got a few different answers from them before you actually presented any idea to them, and you also showed them the video of what it was like to even bring that. I don't think you gave them the answer even then. It was you let them think about it, and then you showed them the video, and then from there they figured it out.
And then we talked again about, okay, so what did we learn?
Yeah. So you never actually, again, you never gave them the answer. You presented the information to them, or the question, they evaluated it, they thought about it, then you gave them some ideas, then you presented the video, which kept them engaged in what you were talking about. And even then, when you didn't tell them, they were on their own figuring it out. They were using the information presented to them by you to figure out the answer. And then also with what are you going to bring up to space? You let them choose. You didn't you had them explain why they would bring these things up to space, but you didn't say no to these things. You gave them positive reasons what they would want to bring. There was a lot of self-taught, with guidance, of course. And there was a lot of resources that you used there for them to figure out these answers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, outstanding there. There was you used a lot of stuff there with the videos and the props.
The next one was using direct instruction and coaching appropriately during instruction. So I guess I tried to make this more of a coaching lesson than a instructing lesson.
Right.
So I tried to get them to their own conclusions.
Right.
But at the same time, it built on a lot of direct instruction. We've taught them about gravity. We've taught them about orbits. We've taught them about the space station. What space is like. So while there's been a lot of direct instruction up to now,
right,
this is kind of like a capstone or like a summative kind of, now I'm going to help you come to your own conclusions.
Right.
So I guess the instructor role was kind of in feedback on what their ideas were, but mostly facilitating and coaching them. And also tried to be a bit of an audience for when they wrote down their own menus.
Right.
Said, okay, tell me what you think. And that was also them working together.
Right.
So I tried to divorce myself from the whole situation completely. So I tried to, use some of those roles.
Yeah, now I remember that. Yeah, that was there's another time where you stood back. I think the whole lesson was basically in that way. Again, I'd say outstanding, because almost the whole lesson was about them coming together and evaluating and using the information you presented to them, and they were coming up with the answers on their own, using the information that you had given them before in the prior weeks while we've been doing this theme. So it's not like they went in cold, but they also you were able to go in there and kind of back off and guide them through the process, letting them figure it out on their own. Especially with the menu thing, they chose what they wanted to eat, and you didn't. It's not rather than. Not, how do I say it, not guide them through it, but more than explain why you would bring that, why, and is it fluffy? You gave them directive there, without telling them no, you shouldn't bring that, but kind of is it fluffy? Because if it's,
is that a good idea?
Yeah. You didn't say no. So I'd say outstanding again. You really went along with them and allowed them to use everything that they've learned throughout these last couple weeks to figure out their answers. through any resources that you presented to them and through any guidance.
Great. Yeah. I tried to like pepper it with direct instruction, but keep it mostly, you know, they're making up their own decisions, but also giving them a chance to work together.
Right.
So, yeah. It's hard to fit that all into a short lesson. The next one was, did the candidate monitor student learning and adjust instructional strategies as necessary to help students learn? This was a little harder, but there were some points, like when we were picking things to take up to the space station. You know, why would we bring paper? Why do you think a comb is a good idea? So maybe if it wasn't such a good idea, giving the students a chance to like reflect on it together. You know, I tried to ask some individual questions to most of the kids, give all the kids a chance to participate. You know, at the end, some of the things that I asked them like had an exit ticket question before they left to pack up to go home.
Right.
So I tried to keep in mind some of the things that they were struggling with that day, or you know they have been struggling with, and ask them more differentiated questions direct to the student to make sure they understood some key things. This was hard.
Yeah.
Adjusting was hard.
There wasn't a big need for it for this class, though. For this lesson, at least. Gave them each a chance to write. They all had a chance to choose what they were going to bring.
And I had to change, and I was with helping some of the kids write. You know, letting some of the younger kids copy instead of write on their own. I was hoping they could write on their own.
You mixed them up like in an even order, where you had the older level DD2s with the DD1s. This is weird. This is not. This is one of those like.
Yeah, it's a little harder, but yeah. So basically, where it was appropriate, especially for the writing, I tried to kind of level them and give them just what they needed, so it was an achievable goal.
Yeah.
I tried to give them a kind of differentiated exit ticket question. During the instruction on the mat, some of the kids who were giving responses that didn't make too much sense, kind of going through the reasons why that answer maybe didn't make as much sense.
And then when they were writing, okay, so they came up with their answers, they wrote their answers, you helped them with the spelling on some of the stuff. And then we went to the table, and then they did their journal there, where they still had to do writing, but they didn't copy what they wrote at the carpet.
No, they got to make up their own mind if they wanted to.
If they wanted to.
And some of the kids, like I said, a lot of kids chose Apple because they written Apple, so I think they just knew how to write Apple.
Right.
So they went with it because it was maybe an easy option. But at least that gave some of the kids who, maybe couldn't have written a lot of it on their own, they at least had some prior exposure to some words they could use.
So you allowed them to use the words that they might know already.
And if some of the older kids or kids who are getting it better and come up with their own ideas.
So that's, I think you continuously monitored them throughout. And there was a small enough class that you could keep an eye on all of them and look for any mistakes that they were making or any guidance that they needed, like further guidance. Engages students in assessing their progress and adjust instruction response to the student learning needs. Because, you allowed them to use the prior words that they've already been familiar with. I guess outstanding. I'd say outstanding. I mean, I don't know what's the difference here.
Adjusting continuousness. Looks like the difference.
Monitor. Yeah, well, I mean, obviously it was continuous because we at every level there, you even were separating them in an even order that you thought, well, they can help each other like that. So I think so outstanding because it was a continuous monitoring situations on all counts on everything that you did with them there.
Awesome.
Outstanding.
Then the last one was, did the candidate select appropriate instructional strategies and resources to help students learn? So I tried to bring in a lot of different stuff. We had the kind of flip flashcards in the beginning for review. We had a globe to kind of demonstrate the Earth and orbiting. We used the computer to look at some videos. We used some whiteboards for writing. And I tried to keep we used the scale for packing. So I tried to keep every piece of instruction short and engaging because it was a lot to take in.
Yes.
But I tried to sequence it in a way that made sense. So by the end, when we were on to what food would you eat in space, they kind of took into account everything about the space station weight, water, no gravity.
Yeah, that was right. Because you started out with the first part was the air thing that went into the astronaut, what the astronaut wears and why they have to wear it because of the protection from the cold and the heat and all that. On this one, and you did use a lot of resources, and like the videos were really like, because they were able to see what you were talking about, like with the whole washing of the hair. I would say, again, outstanding, because I know they seem the same, but here it's candidate creates and implements innovative strategies. And
Yeah, innovative,
that,
right?
That astronaut flipboard was really cool. I like that idea, and you made that. But not only that, but it wasn't just that. But you also had them. You went further than that, and you were having them because some of the assessment stuff is left and right, and you had to focus on that as well, left or right. You set it up in that fashion. I mean, I don't know if that's the way you were going to do it before that, but then I did hear you, all of a sudden you said, okay, either left or right. Kind of you changed that. So you obviously knew, okay, that's part of the assessment that's coming up. So you changed that small part just for that. You created those cards. You had the video set up beforehand. And we have the balance always there.
Yeah, using the scale, I think, is...
The scale.
It helps them visualize, like... Yeah, there's a limit to weight.
To limit, yeah. Outstanding because of the whole creating and you made some of the resources. I mean, we have some available. The whole astronaut thing was pretty cool. I like that, and it was just because it was your creation. You used it, and it wasn't just like a picture for them to use. It was a way to help them understand like why Earth or why space is cold and why they need to have certain protection. And you allowed them to fail on some parts. Bye, Miley. You let them fail. When they turn over, like, oh, now you don't have your space boots. What's going to happen? And they could explain, like, oh, but your helmet's okay, but not your boots. So you let them fail, and not fail, but find out the results of, not having space boots or space gloves. Yeah, so outstanding again. You used a lot of resources, and everything was segued from one piece to the next to the final part, which was the food part. It all made sense. It was a very lesson. Like you didn't just surprise them with anything. You introduced the topic, and then from there, that was a good lesson. That was a really good lesson.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Outstanding.